Okay, so yesterday we did mixing active record with Sinatra. So before we had a regular site, but it was very static. It could pull data from Twitter, but not store it. So we built a system where we could add data and save it and edit it, basically just keep our own data in the system. Yeah, so I'm just going to summarize what we did yesterday just to refresh. We did that using the active record gem, which is taken out of Twitter, or not Twitter, Ruby on Rails. And it's like an in-between layer between Ruby and the database, because the database speaks SQL, which is a different language. And we could talk to it in SQL, but it would be kind of a mishmash. So, active record, much nicer. Mainly because it lets us do really nice stuff like post.all and post.create, and it's very simple to use. It's a little bit magic, because we have to do things like this, that we just put in this line that says, hey, there's a post, make it work. But when it works, it does just work. Otherwise, most of it was the same as what we've done before. We had the same usual URLs. Index page lists everything. The new page is the form for creating a new one, and create is the page that receives the form. Edit and update, same pattern. There's one page to display the form and one page to process it. And we had a show page for each form. And inside those, it still was the same as normal, that we have some kind of Ruby code that we put in a variable, and then on the next step do something with it. And that follows the whole way along. For example, when we're doing the create, on one step we pull out the form parameters, put it in a variable, pass that variable to the post create, and then take the result of post create, put it in a variable, and then that ends up in the, well, in this case, in the redirect. New things that we did, I think the redirect was new, which is instead of rendering a template, to jump to an entirely new page, and you just give it an URL. That's all it takes, the URL that you want to go to. The main bits of active record we used were post.all to find all the posts. Or yeah, to get the existing posts, I guess. Create to create new ones. Find to get one specific one. And .find takes one single number and gives you back one single item. And yeah, I think that's about it. Okay. So that's generally what we did. Today we're just gonna carry on with that and add a few more details, really. The main one being migrations, which you saw briefly in yesterday's exercise, which I no longer have. Okay, yeah, but you saw migrations briefly. We're going to do them in more detail today, explain what they actually are, how they work, and how to use them. If I can find that tutorial. Okay. Migrations were this crazy up-down thing. And what else? Yeah, mostly we're kind of gonna build up through a few more of the things that we'll see in Rails, but that we can use in this, so that when we do see them in Rails, we know what they are. All right, so where do I want to get started? Okay, I'm actually going to start with the easiest thing first, because it's early in the morning. So one thing we started to see was that we've been putting URLs in places and generating them by hand. So for example, the redirect here, and in the template we're linking to post new things. That's not terrible, but it gets a bit annoying for stuff like this. Actually, remember before I was mentioning not to mix ERB, the HTML and ERB with Ruby code so much. And this is kind of a good example because it's a little bit hard to read now. Like, it's not impossible, you can figure it out, but you can't, like for example, if you look at this line, it's really obvious what's happening. If you look at this one, you're like, oh wait, there's this thing, and then this is an ID, so this must go together to make this. And you kind of have to like think about it a bit. Well, you know what's nicer is if we could turn it into something that you just go, aha, that's what that does. And so what we're going to do is create some functions instead to do that. So to pass away the URL generation to a little like module that will figure it out. This bit I only remember 90% off the top of my head, so it'll be a little bit bumpy. Alright, but let's pick this post redirect one first, because it's the easiest. And let's put it just after dev post. So we're going to move this later, but for now it's easiest to just cram it here. URL helpers. Post. Where did that go? Okay, so what I want is to be able to just give it a post and say, give me an URL to the show page for this post. I don't want to worry about how you do it, just make it happen. And I literally just copied and pasted this from the redirect down here, it's the same one. Okay, did everybody get that? Because I need to disappear, so that means instead in this redirect down in the update, oh actually maybe let's do it in the create. Yeah, I can show them both at the same time. So in create, instead of manually typing in the URL, I'm just going to do posts, post URL, post. So it's going to pass the post that we got out of the create into the URL helper. The URL helper is going to figure out what the URL should be and give it back. Well, actually, I'll do it in 2 steps to make it more. Okay, so you guys don't need to type this. This is just going to be a demo. Okay, so redirect just takes a string, and whatever that string is, it will try and go to. So we're doing it all in one line on line 38. but we could put in a variable, or I'm putting in a variable just to kind of like prove it's just a normal boring string, which is what post_URL will give back. So post_URL responds with a string, and that's enough. So in this case, I'm going to tell it to go to Google. So you can really put in anything. So if I create one, I should end up on google.com. And I don't know what happens if I do like this. I think I can even put in random junk and it will still try and go there. Okay, in this case, it thinks it's one of its own URLs. But yeah. Okay, so let's go back. Okay. So yeah, redirect just takes normal boring string and the browser tries to go there. So in this case, our post_URL, we just give back a normal boring string. Next bit, I just need to look up for a second.
Yeah, but then you have to know that we have to put a string there. You have to put it in parentheses.
Yes, or what was the, or not sure what the question is.
Well, I mean, it's good to know that redirect works with a string, because I don't think we knew that. I don't know, I didn't know that. Because then if you put any function there, it always has to be string at the end.
Yes, good point.
Something that works.
Yep, so you can do as many steps as you like, but the thing that at the end that you give to redirect has to be a string. Alright, so next bit, tiny bit odd. So the next place we used that I think was in the index. We used it here. And we can do the same thing. Oh yeah, so in index ERB, for each post, we made the title. Where's it gone? So we made the title here be a link to the show page. And we did it the same way that we like manually generated the URL. But again, what would be nicer is if we could do the post_URL post. And actually the reason for this, so at the moment we're not really gaining that much. The reason why it gets like more useful is when you have really complicated URLs, like get me the URL for the first comment of the 27th blog post. You can just ask the URL helpers, hey, make this happen. But it still does make it a little bit easier to read. Well, with one catch. It's going to explode. Oh, it didn't explode. That was unexpected. Give me a second. Yeah, well that's... Oh well, never mind. Didn't think that was going to work, but it did. Okay, how do I get rid of this? Go away. Oh. Okay, so index HTML is now a little bit easier to read. One downside is it does mean you have to kind of go back to these and look them up sometimes. Because you'll see some really complicated URL thing and be like, I don't know what's gonna, you don't know what it's gonna print out. Okay, so the next bit then will be a little bit boring. We're just gonna update a few of the more of them. So we need def new post URL. It doesn't need brackets because it's always going to be /posts, /new. I think we want edit post, URL. Yeah, we want a post. again, this is something that Rails conveniently generates for you. We're kind of just doing it to see what it's doing behind the scenes when we do it automatically later. Okay, and it's not at this point really that important that you do all of them. Oops. So I guess just take a bit of a wander through the app and change any that you find. I'm going to go through it kind of quickly, so don't really worry if you don't change all the ones I do, as long as you get the concept. But the other thing is now if we ever need to change the URL, which sometimes happens, that like you decide actually, oops, I want to change this to like article. You don't have to change the 1001 templates that you've used it in, because each one is just going to ask, like each one of these is going to ask what is the URL, and now it's changed here, so everybody gets the new change. Okay, let's just do one last one and then we'll wrap that up. Post create. Oh, I got post create wrong. It should just be posts/create. Alright, so let's just do one last change, and that's the edit page, which we can now make edit post girl add post. And now that looks much easier to read. Form action will go to the edit post URL for this post. Sure.
That should be the update post.
Oh, yes, correct.
Why did we use the add post before?
Because, so we are
The
in
index, the idea?
edit. So we are in the edit action, and we found one post based on which post we're trying to edit. So we end up on post/1/edit. So we need to get post 1 so that we can like throw it around places, which is what we do here. Because later on we're going to want to know what is its like title and body to put them into the edit form. But we do the getting in the server RB. But anything we do in server RB we can't really access in the template unless we make it like sort of global, and that's what the @ symbol is. So it's like we're defining a variable in the action.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
I
And then
just don't know why not an index, because we kind of,
oh, index.
don't we need it there then the same way, or is that different?
Well, in this case we do the @ for posts, because we define posts in here,
But not anymore,
but we don't need it here.
because
Because
it
we're
uses that, okay.
Yep. So it's like this one is accessing one from somewhere else. But now that we've got it, we're like staying in the current place. Okay. Alright. And this is a bit messy having it here, so let's just create a file called URL helpers.rb and then copy that in. So it's just exactly the same functions, we just shoved it in another file. Nope. And then at the top of server RB, we can require /Earl helpers. And that's also just a quick example of how you can, like if you have a chunk of code that is getting too complicated, you can just shove it somewhere else quickly and then bring it in. Hopefully the site still works. Yep.
Mine shows an error.
Right. It says server 78, although it's maybe becoming wrong.
Yeah, it says here and it says like, well, it was earlier the last time and it said expected error.
Yep. Well, it means something opened somewhere, and then I got to the end of the file, didn't find the end. That says go to the.
We did have it on server.
Alright. Was it Earl helpers? Was he working on it?
No,
Oh, okay.
since the
Back to server. I think that will fix it.
wow, I didn't see that.
Yeah, it's
We
quite.
looked at it, right? And we didn't see it.
Oh, it might be still commented out.
Yeah.
Because you are updating like after the edit still well?
Probably not.
But it doesn't really change it. Saying something without process or something. Okay.
No, it's okay. Take a quick
But
look.
when we go back to the previous thing without changing anything?
Oh, maybe it's the Earl is the wrong helper or.
So form like update post around, post any update, update.
Alright, can we go back to the edit setting? In Browser. Inspect button. Or is it view source? It's not printing. No.
Oh,
Sorry,
Yep.
it doesn't, I think it doesn't remember where my table is, where my data is. Is it there?
Are you in Tux or in IRB?
This is
You're in
Tux. Because it gives me this, so I went to Tux to see if it even knows, and it doesn't know.
Well, that's not good. Alright, is it go reach? Oh, it's not printing.
Yeah, okay. I don't know why this is here.
I'm guessing you typed in the wrong file at some point yesterday. That's right.
So that should be it, right? Okay.
Hmm? Means so something is a good end, or there's one that's open but not being closed. Just probably figure out. think I'm gonna put these in helpers anyway. Okay, so I was a bit surprised that we could use these URLs in the views. I was expecting that it wouldn't let us, because normally, I don't know. I don't really know why they wouldn't normally. I mean, like, definitely when you get to the size of Rails, because Rails has like 10 million moving parts that basically none of the parts connect to each other unless you tell them. It has this idea called helpers, which are functions that you specifically say, hey, I want you to be available. So Sinatra has a similar concept, but apparently you don't need to do it, it's just optional. But just for a laugh, we're going to do it anyway. So around the functions, put helpers do, and then an end. Oh. So I'm just going to test actually works, because it might not. Alright, yep, that works. Okay, so we don't really need it in Sinatra, but I don't know. It's kind of a good habit at this point. But we're kind of explicitly saying, hey, this is a function that we want. And it's a bit weird because it's not like normal globals, it's kind of a Sinatra and Rails specific thing. That it will, when it's doing the ERB thing, deliberately go and look for helpers and go, okay, I'll bring those in. Have you heard anything? Is he still AWOL? I don't know. I'm wondering if he's like gonna be 20 minutes late or like 2 hours late. Because I can.
He doesn't really know. Probably stuck with his boss.
Alright, let's move on then, and he can look it up.
For me, when I update post, now it sends me back to the edit page, although it should go to the update page.
Maybe we made the same mistake he did, so let's just go ahead. Oh, no, that's right.
And this goes to here,
Alright,
which goes to there, right?
yep, so let's go to the browser. And then do right click view source. Okay, it's getting, did you look at the function and make sure it's right? Or is he in the format? So it's for the URL helpers. First of all, I think that's correct. Equals to output. Let me try restarting the server for a second.
Okay, maybe it's that. They did change something.
That's okay. So the next topic is kind of fuzzy and difficult to explain. It is the migrations. Where did migrations go?
Helpers do has to have an end at the end or not?
Yep, helpers do needs an end. Pretty much anywhere you use a do needs an end. Okay, where did these go? Okay, so migrations. Why do we do migrations? What are they for? Because they're a little bit annoying, or they take more effort than doing it by hand, and they can have weird side effects. And it's also quite easy to do them wrong. And so what is the reason? So before, when we wanted to change the structure of the database, we went to the SQLite manager. Oh yeah, well maybe a before thing for that. So, actually yeah, no, so that's right. So if we wanted to create a new table, or if we wanted to edit the existing table, like to add a new row, we have to go to this, or if we want to delete a table. So we can change the data with our app, like we can add posts and remove posts, but we can't change the structure of the table through the app, or not as it's structured at the moment. And that's deliberate. I guess because databases are so delicate that, for example, if we have written our code to say print out the post.title and I'm not paying attention and I rename it. Can I rename it? Somewhere I can rename it. If I rename this to rename, no, not post. Well, I should just rename. So if I rename the whole table to articles, the whole thing is gonna break. It's just gonna flat out go, what? I don't know, I can't find posts, this makes no sense anymore, because I renamed it. So basically changing the database is something you want to do carefully, which is why Active Record doesn't let you do it in the app. Because you don't want someone going to the edit page to edit their blog post, but then you accidentally rename the table and the whole site breaks for everybody. Okay, so we want to change the structure, we can't do it directly in the app. We can do it with this user interface. But if we're working in a team, so we each have the same, like we're working on the same app, but each person has their own copy of the database on their computer. So if I go here and start clicking stuff and go, okay, I'm going to add a new table. What was that word? So I add a table, I call it, I don't know, users, I give it name, whatever. Text. It works for me, but now you guys also have to do the clicking. Which means it's time consuming and really flaky, because maybe I called it users and you mishear what I said and call it like user, or I'm just like I forget a step that I like. Maybe I created it and then realized I created it wrong and then I needed to edit it. So I don't know. How do I change this? So maybe the first time I created it wrong and changed something like the default value to hello, but I forget that. Oh, whoops. Alright, anyway. Tells me I can't do it. So the point is the whole clicky thing, it's very flaky, it's very annoying in a team. Also it's not testable. Maybe it works this one time, but I can't rehearse it. So if I'm doing something really, really big, which happens occasionally, like the site runs for 5 years and then you realize actually the way we're recording the financial transactions is wrong. We want to store it against like the user instead of against the shop or something, and you have to rearrange the whole database, and you don't want to break the live site, so you kind of want to rehearse it a few times and rehearse it until you're sure it works. If we're doing the click thing, it's really hard to guarantee we're going to do it the same way every time. Okay, anyway, so that's enough of that rambling. So the idea is that you instead make these migration files, which is Ruby and still Active Record, but it's like an outside the app part. So it's not in your app, it's like this whole dedicated file. And it's like a script that you're going to use once to say, okay, Active Record, I want you to go create a new table and I want it to have exactly this structure. And this is the opposite of the clicking, that it's like, it's written down, it's stored, you can rehearse it. Because it's stored, you can give it to the other people on your team and say, okay, now you guys run this on your app. And also then when you go to the live server, if you run it on your computer and it worked, you can run it on the live server and you're pretty sure it's going to work as well. It's testable because you can revert it. Like you can tell, I want you to undo this. So you write it in one direction saying, when you run it, I want you to create the table, and if I decide it's rubbish, undo it by dropping the table, like deleting it. And that lets you do the rehearsing thing. So like you write it, you check it works. If you're not sure it works, you go back and then try it again, and you keep trying it again until you've like polished it till you're sure it works. Somewhere I had rules. Okay, so let's maybe, should we just create one? There's a few bits that I'm probably going to have to repeat a bunch of times because it's really weird, or it's like, there's things that are really simple, but if you forget them, the whole thing goes horribly wrong. One of the biggest ones is that a migration only changes the structure. Okay, in this case they've also put in some like test data, but generally that's the split. Migration changes the structure of the database, and the app changes like the content. So whenever you want to do something, make sure you pick the right one. Yeah, definitely write lots and lots and lots and lots of notes on this because it's very confusing. I have some suggestions for things to write down in a bit, but we'll come back. Okay, so let's do a little bit of boring stuff first. To make it work, oh, do we need to make it work? Alright, no we don't. Okay, so to make it work we need this rake tool, and I've never even figured out what a good description for rake is other than stuff. It's basically anything that like needs to be part of your app but is not the app. Like things that aren't on a page, so migration isn't a web page, but it still needs to go in the app somewhere, so it goes into rake. And again, it's one of the things you never really need to know what it is. It's just like, you'll see a tutorial that says type rake blah blah blah, and then it does it. Okay, but to make it work we need a magic file. So let's just create this, whoops, and it needs to be called rake file. Again, so this is just one of those files, it's like the config file that you don't really need to know what it's doing or how it works, it makes the magic happen. Or basically it's saying like load it up and load both the server and load rake and connect them. A minor thing you maybe noticed yesterday, crap. Oh, I broke everything. That require.server. In the tutorial it says require app because instead of server RB they used app.rb.
So we did this yesterday, right? So can we just do it again for
Yep.
the database that we had, or shall we?
So this is still in the posts thing that we created yesterday.
So we just do it in there again.
Yep. Yeah, so we're doing the same stuff you did yesterday afternoon, but now with an explanation. And to test it worked, I guess create a new tab, make sure you're in the same directory, and if you do rake-t, it should give you a list of stuff and not explode. That's a capital T. And it does a whole bunch of, it's like added a bunch of tasks, most of which we don't really need, and never will. But one of them is the creating migrations. Alright. Okay, so what do we need? So does it? No, it's not yet. So each migration needs to be in a file, and the file needs like a fancy name, which is the date and time it was created, and then just a bunch of text. We could do that by hand, but conveniently the rakedb thing gives us a like helper task. So it's rake, and you can copy and paste this from the thing either now or later on. It is somewhere up here as well, like create migration. So it's create migration, and we can give it a name. We can call it anything, and generally you want to give it a sensible name. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna do add users. So I'm gonna create a users table, but we're not really gonna do much with it. Okay. So you'll see it tells you it created a file, db migrate big complicated number, which is 2015 May the 5th. And is that the current time? 08:42, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, roughly the current time.
Oh yes, I guess I already tried that, it was off by 2 hours.
Yeah, there's something weird with my clock. Okay, and it's created a file. And mostly this is just like placeholder. So we don't really need to worry about what this is doing. It's basically saying, I am a migration. And all the important bits go in change. Which again, I guess is one of the important bits, that if I do stuff outside of it, if you do stuff outside of the change up or down ones, it won't work. Because the things inside change are what the migration runs. Sometimes you will see def up, def down. That's the same as change. So remember I mentioned that migrations you can like undo them. Up is saying this is what I want you to do, down is saying what I want you to undo, but change is kind of like both at the same time. I don't know how much sense that makes. Or some of them it can automatically figure out how to undo. So if you do a change, it will look at what is in change and try and figure out how to undo it itself. So for the most part use change. If you see the up down, just know that they're roughly the same thing. Okay, and I'm going to be lazy and copy paste. This is one of these ones that don't worry about learning the syntax, because no one ever does. Or it's the kind of thing you use rarely enough that you'll never remember it. Users name text. I don't know. Description of biography. Okay, so what's happening here? So we're telling it what changes to the structure do we want to make. In this case, I want to say I want you to create a new table. This is going to be the name of the table, and these are the things that go in it. And again, don't worry about remembering this. It's the kind of thing you just like look at a previous example. On the left goes what should the column type be, and on the right is what is the name of the column. Timestamps is that created at and updated at. Oops. next to that.
So it just basically creates for each table item the column name, biography, and age.
Yeah, wait, give me a second. Ooh, where did Firefox go? So in the user interface, there's a create table thing. So I could do users, what was it? Name, age, description. So I could fill in the user interface and say, I want you to create a table with this and this and this. But this migration will do the same thing.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the syntax. That's all. Like you specify the type of data.
Yep.
Is that
Yeah, so I can do the
string,
same.
text, integer? So we could have two T strings, for example, and then put name first and name last.
Yep. Actually, let's do that then. T first name. The difference between string and text, by the way, is text is just longer. What was it? Last name. So you can have as many strings, as many text, as many integers as you want. So yeah, your first name is probably not going to be more than 20 letters, but text is maybe going to be 10,000 lines long, and the database will do that.
Do you not need the def up, that's it? Tutorial thing?
Def down.
So you can do either up down or change. Actually, I'll write that.
Either one.
Yeah, just give me a second. I want to write that down. Somewhere I had a file with all this notes, but I can't find it. Aha, okay, this is handy. Change. Oops. Alright, okay. Where were we? Yes. So we could do def up and then def down. So you guys don't need to type this. And in down I can say drop table users. So one is like the do it and one is the undo it. Or I can just say change and it will figure out the doing and the undoing for me, because create table is quite a simple one. So it knows the opposite of create is drop. So for the most part, change and up are the same thing. I tend to use change, but just out of habit. Okay, so now we've got a migration. How do we run it? Because remember, it's not part of the app. And the normal way we interact with the app is like through the browser. But we're not going to do that. So instead, so the way to run migrations, and this is one of the bits that's confusing, so I'm going to try and go over it a few times. Well, actually, yeah, okay, so we do rake db migrate, and the migration system keeps track of which ones it's already ran. So when you do rake db migrate, it goes through the list and goes, which ones have I not run? I'm going to run them and then record that I ran them. So in this case, we haven't run the first one. So if I type rake db migrate, oh, it explodes. Well, that's not right. Oh, users already exists. Alright, wait, I'm dumb. Your one should be fine. I already created a user table.
So you would always usually want to run like all of the migration to like get the server to what it was before, or like the database in the hash to what it was before. You wouldn't like selectively say I want to run this migration, but not the other migrations.
Yes, you generally always want to run all of them and not like just pick them at random, or not at random, but by choice. Mostly because it gets messy, that unless you're very sure what is happening in one or the other, you'll inevitably end up picking the wrong one. Or in a way it's super strict because, I don't know, well, short version, humans are dumb. So in a way it's like super strict to stop you destroying stuff yourself. So the first company I worked at, we didn't do this. The way we wanted to change stuff was you called up the sysadmin and said, hey, can you change this to that? Or can you change this to that, and then can you put this code on the server? And that went wrong pretty much every single time. Because you had to like write a Word document of instructions, and because I'm dumb and he's dumb, inevitably stuff would get strange. Like the server wouldn't be in the state that I thought it was, so when I say change A to B, it was never A in the first place, it was already C, so now he's changing it from C to B. And basically it just got really messy. So the migration system is like, be super, super, super strict, and then there's no ambiguity. So it's like you, for example, once you've run a migration, you should never change it. You should create a second migration to like undo it. The reason being, so say we're on a team and there's 10 migrations, and we've all run them, but you create one and run it, and then I run it, but then you change it and rerun it, but I don't notice you've changed it, so I don't rerun it on mine. I won't get your changes, so it all gets confused, or we're not sure who's running the old version. Alright, but I think I'll come back to that one. Okay, so let's jump back a bit.
Runners then.
Yep.
Runners.
It's giving a warning, we can ignore it without specifying an option for null. Oops. Okay, so you should see a line that looks, well, you should see it say create table users, and then how long it took, and then a line saying migrated. Should hopefully not explode. And if that worked, and you look in the Firefox thing, I should now, when I hit reload, see bish, users pop up. So now I have a users table. to make sure you've got the right DB open, and you probably need to hit reload. But if not, I can come wander post it. So, where are you? I think you need to go. Yeah, you need to open the page. It's not selected.
I just don't, do I have to download from the file?
Yep. Yep, maybe ask you that.
But the migrate thing is in the other one, doesn't, it has to be this.
Yep, that's okay. Yeah, no, that's good. So we need to open Firefox. Oh, this is the context one. This is the reaction one.
Yeah.
But is it not the password one? Yeah, so that was the read from the other project. Cool. Um, okay, so a few things came up. Wait, where am I going? Yeah, so this is still always changing, this dbsqlite file. So it's created the migration files in a DB folder, but the dbsqlite still stays in the same place. This schema one, by the way, if you ever see it, is just what does it think the current database looks like. So don't worry about it too much, the schema file, it's just like, so I'm not even sure where it comes from. What does it think the database looks like? But yeah, so migration files go in this migration folder, but they still act on the same dbsqlite file. And right, what happened next? So we created a users table. It's all here. If you look at structure, you can see the first name, last name. Let's just actually create some. So if you go to browse and search and do add, Edward, yeah, just one is enough. Oh. Okay, that's weird. Oh, it's over there. Oh, minor thing. You notice we didn't put an ID column. When we said create the table, we didn't tell it to create the ID column. It did it itself. So Active Record knows when you tell it to create a table that it should put in an ID because it's gonna need it. Alright, so it's in the database now. We've changed the structure, we've put in some data. The next bit is a trick question. If I do user.first, it does not work. Alright, so I'll just go to server RB for a second. Can anybody tell me why this doesn't work?
Because we haven't linked it yet, like class user in it.
Exactly. So server RB knows the database exists, but it doesn't really know about individual tables and how to use them until we tell it. So with post, that's pretty much what this class post was telling it. There's gonna be a post table and I want you to use it and turn it into a Ruby object called post. And now we have the same situation with user, that we created a table and it's got data in it and it's ready for us to put in data, but the server RB does not yet know about it. And so to do that, we need to do class user and copy this active record thing. And that's kind of the other important opposite end to migrations, that because migrations only change the structure, you still have to remember to change the app to match that structure. Or vice versa, I don't know, if you add a form on your site and you want to add a field to the form, you need to remember to change the structure to create that field in the database, otherwise it goes nowhere. So yeah, so that's one of those things, it's like it's technically super simple, but it has strange side effects that aren't always expected. Okay, so let's do that one. So add class user, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, save it.
And the other thing here, you did that in Tux, right?
Yep. And again, because of the naming structures, we don't need to tell it a lot. Like, we don't need to tell it what the table is called, because it will know. You asked me for a thing called capital U user, so I'm gonna look for a table called users. If I had called the table user, it would explode and say, hey, where's users? That one, again, you kind of don't have to worry about, because when it breaks, it will tell you what it was looking for.
So, okay.
Yeah, so if you get it wrong, it will tell you, I'm looking for users, and then you look at your thing and go, oh, I called it user, and that works out.
So when we created the file, we called it add users, and then we created the table called users.
Yep.
Okay.
Important thing about this is we could have called it anything.
We could have said users too?
Well, more that the name of a migration doesn't mean anything. So we could call it, today I want to do stuff with users that I will add to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Or we could just call it like potato, potato, potato.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously you do still want it, usually it'll end up looking quite similar to what the content is,
Yeah.
but it's not a magic, the name isn't part of the code, it doesn't do anything,
Mm-hmm.
it's only what is inside. Yep, okay. So where are we going? So now that we've added the class, it should now know what the table name is, it should have picked it up, and now we can do user.first, user.last, and all that kind of stuff. Will this work? Okay. So Tux, you need to exit and restart. But now user.first.
Did you also restart the server?
Doesn't
matter.
I think the server won't need a restart, but that's kind of just a guess. To be honest, with the server restart, it's kind of you try it, and if it doesn't work, go for it. Okay, but now we can use the user object in Rubyland. Dot name, oops, no. Oh, dot first name. Dun, dun, dun. And again, it magically has just figured out, if I do user dot column names.
Hey guys, so there for the whatever, I think it's for this thing.
I take a picture,
Yep.
and you can see your faces. I set it up in Photoshop.
Cool.
Okay.
Yep. No worries. Okay. For them to put in the add to list the room people buy it. What we're doing? Okay. So we've got the user. It magically knows what column name exists. So there's a lot of stuff like that happens. The active record just figures it out. Fancy technical word I think is reflection, but don't worry about that. where was I going with that? Yeah, so we don't have to tell active record a lot. As long as we follow the pattern, capital U, username, pointy thing, active record base, it can kind of fill in the rest. And all the user create stuff works as well. And it just magically goes. Okay, so where were we there? Okay, so we created a migration, it created a table, it only changed the structure. In fact, or literally creating the table was all that it did, so we still needed to tell the server RB how to like connect to that table. But after that point, so we could theoretically do all this like new create edit page. I'm not going to bother, but use your imagination. Oh yeah, something that came up yesterday, maybe. And okay, you can obviously see it now, but the one question was like, can you have multiple ones of these? And the answer is yes. So if you have multiple tables, you can just do multiple class da 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 da. So you can have as many tables and as many classes as you like. Okay, so let's think about that for a second. Okay, so we're going to create another migration purely for education purposes. Posts. So we have the post table. So okay, yeah, actually, so we just did a create. We added a new table. I want to just do how do we modify a table. And for that, I think I'm going to add to posts a score, like a ranking score. So I could do it in here again. If I go to structure, I can do score, type, integer, and do add column. But again, then we have the same problem that everybody else on the project needs to know what we were supposed to be typing and then click it. Obviously that's annoying. So, new migration. I'm going to cheat and just go hit up through your history until you bring it back. Add score to posts. Okay, so once again it creates a new file. We can check out that file. It's pre-filled it. It's given a place. Same again with the change. And I never remember this, to be honest. Okay, so syntax for add column, again, things to not bother remember, just look it up every time. Like I'm still looking it up after years. And it's table name, what was the field name? Score, and then the type. Alright, and I'm about to type reactdb migrate. I'm not going to hit enter just yet. And this brings us back to something I mentioned, that it will only run migrations that it hasn't already run. So I don't need to tell it, hey, run add score to parts. I just tell it, run all of the ones that you haven't run. And And that as a system works quite well because maybe I had one and you had one and you had one, and then you arrive on the project like a week late and you just say week2be migrate and it runs all three that you haven't run.
What if someone doesn't want theirs to be run and then it's, what if someone doesn't want theirs to be run yet?
The idea is generally you don't push it to the team until
Okay.
it's finished, because then it gets messy. Yeah, so generally you'll make sure it works on your computer first and then send it to everybody else. And if it turns out to be broken, then you create, like after everyone's run it and then it's come to you and say, hey, this is rubbish, it's broke. You create a new one to unbreak it, because otherwise it gets too hard to coordinate if you change the previous one and then send an email saying rerun it. Everyone now has to start thinking of like, wait, have I run that one or not run that one? Or was it that one? Da 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 da. Whereas if you just create a new one, they just run week2be migrate and it goes shoop.
Does it make a log or something to remember that?
Technically yes, but no one ever looks at it. I think in the database, so whoops. So it says I've done number 201504237, which is that one. In fact, that's
So basically it will just take like everything with a newer date,
I think
or will it add all of them here? Or will it
well, to be honest, that's why you use whenever you do the create migration thing, or when you do create migration, it puts on the current date, but the date is a number, so kind of it naturally ends up that each next one is an increasing number.
Yeah, but like let's say you get a migration from someone else and it happens to be older than the last migration that you ran, will it still work out?
I assume so because I've never had the reverse happen.
Okay, no.
I think yes. I'm not 100% sure, but every time I've run week2be migrate, it's worked. So I'm guessing yes. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to run week2be migrate. It's going to run the new one, but not the old one, which is good because otherwise, if it reran them all, it would try and create the table, and then it would create the table, and create the table, and create the table, or like it would endlessly add columns. So yeah, if you guys run that as well, you should see it say add the column, but not the other one. And then I can run week2be migrate like 20 times and nothing happens because it's noticed, okay, I've run them all. Oh crap, don't do that. And again, that's why it's quite handy that then you never really have to coordinate with your teammates of like, okay, wait, have you created a migration? Have you created one? Have I run it? Da 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 da. It's just you run week2be migrate, and if it sees new ones, it runs them. And that, as a system, generally it works out. You, when you're writing migrations, need to be careful about what you're doing, but then it means you never have to worry about everyone else. Okay, so if that worked, we can take a quick look at the database. Oh, I don't see it. Body, what? Okay, that's weird.
Yeah, also I have it like if I expand on posts on the left, it shows, but it doesn't show in the browse and search.
Okay, well, it worked, but the SQLite manager is kind of not noticing. Okay, but that means we should be able to go to tux and do post.last.score. Okay, we get nil. Let's do post.last. Okay, so let's give one of the posts a score. Wait.
I think we put it in the wrong table, because we called the table name post and not users.
No, I wanted it in posts, that was fine.
Okay, well,
Okay, so I want to change the migration. Okay, so this is kind of jumping further ahead than I wanted. But I've just realized I did the migration not wrong, but it could have been better. Because right now, everybody's score defaults to nil. And what you can do in migrations is tell it what you want the default value to be. Actually, will that work? Give me a minute, I'm just gonna check something. This may or may not even slightly work.
is this how you undo it then, roll back?
Yes. Ooh. Oh, I clicked something I shouldn't have. Oh crap. Object name. Oh dear. I think I fiddled with something and now I've destroyed all of it. Object name reserved for internal use. Auto index posts 1. Right. This is a terrible idea. Oh crap. Ah man. Ah. So I broke a bunch of stuff, but now I fixed it. I want to set a default on the what's it? On the column. So I can do ricdb rollback, which will undo the migration. Then I can edit it and add this.
Will it undo all my migrations or?
Only the previous one. Oh, did you get the same error as I did? Scroll up. Okay, that's a problem. Okay, well, if it broke just leave it broke because it took a while for me to get it working, so forget about it. Okay, but the idea is you can roll back one migration, and if it's broke, I'll fix it later. Change it and then rerun it. I suspect all of yours will break as well. So I can do rollback to rollback one. So then when I run migrate again, it goes, okay, I will rerun it. Is yours breaking as well?
I can do the rollback, I guess, but when I do the migrate again, it didn't do. I don't know if it works.
Rollback
Oh,
yeah, that number. Alright, okay. Weird side effect. But the principle is there. Admittedly, you generally shouldn't do that because of that team problem. Or you should only do that if you haven't yet published it to your other team members. So whenever you're fiddling and just creating a migration in the first place, it's fine to like create it, change it, roll back, blah 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 blah. But as soon as somebody else has run it, you don't want to change it. Because then you end up out of sync. That his migration says add a column and your migration says remove a column. But they both think they're the same migration. And just basically weird, confusing stuff happens. Okay, so we'll take a break in a minute. So let's just summarize a bit. Where did we go? Okay. So in Sinatra, but only in Sinatra, we need to tell it to load the rake files. We don't in Rails because it will do it automatically. Or rake is actually a part of Rails, which is why it's there. In this case, we're taking it out of Rails and putting it in Sinatra, so we need to tell it, load it. So we need to load this random, weird, boring file. Don't worry about how it works. What do we do? Once we load that, that gives us the ability to run rake tasks, and some of those are to do with the database. One of them is to create a migration file. Once we've filled in the migration file, we can migrate it, like tell it to run it, and if we don't like it, we can tell it undo it. That's also quite important on a live server, because maybe you make some changes and you realize that actually it's broken something, and you want to quickly be able to bring the live server back to what it was before you change things. With the click, click, click version, you need to remember what you did and how to do the reverse. With RakeDB rollback, it knows what it did, so it can immediately bring you back to where you were. Okay. When you create migrations, it gives you a blank file that you can then fill in the change or the up and down sections with your changes. And those changes are generally only to the structure. You want to tell it, I want to add columns, remove columns, create a table, delete a table, or rename columns. You can also add data here, but for the most part, it doesn't really come up. Where's it going? Yeah, when you create a table, it only creates it in the database. We still need to tell it in server RB, so server RB doesn't know we changed anything unless we tell it. Well, actually, it's only new tables we need to tell it about. This class user, if we add and remove a column, the automatic column detecting thing will just figure that out anyway. And obviously, we need to change our code. That if we change post.name to post.title or vice versa, we obviously need to change our templates to match. If we have multiple migrations and we run RakeDB migrate, it keeps track of what it has and hasn't run. and we'll only run the new ones. Was that everything? And for the most part, those are the two things you're going to use. Create table, add column, and maybe rename column, which is also pretty similar. You can do really crazy stuff, but for the most part, that's the only ones you need. And I think that's everything we covered. Yeah, and I guess just to summarize that, so I wrote down somewhere like, I don't know, I recommend writing these down as like a here is the step-by-step guide. It's quite simple, but I don't know, in the beginning everyone gets confused. So, you want to change the database, there's 3 steps. 1, create the file. 2, fill it in. And 3, run rakedp migrate. Because inevitably you forget one of them. Running migrations. Yeah. Alright, and I think that's about it for now.